Have you ever really stopped to think about the words you're reading right now, or the book on your shelf, or that poster on the wall? It's easy to take it all for granted. But today, we're going to dive into the incredible story of print, an idea, a technology that literally wrote our modern world into existence. I mean it. Print is so fundamental to everything we do, it's kind of become invisible. It's like the air we breathe in our information age, the very foundation of how we learn, how we communicate, and even how we think. Just look around you for a second. The news you scrolled through this morning, the ads you saw on the way to work, the calendar on your wall, even the box your lunch came in. Print is absolutely everywhere. It shapes our daily lives in 1,000 tiny ways. That's the big question, isn't it? To really get it, we have to travel back in time, to a world where ideas moved at the speed of a human hand. This isn't just a story about technology. This is the story of a revolution. Now, you might think this story starts in Europe with Gutenberg, but it doesn't, not even close. We've got to go much earlier and much farther east to find the very first sparks of this incredible idea. So the earliest version of this was something called woodblock printing, which first popped up in China, Japan, and Korea. Just imagine it. You have to painstakingly carve every single letter, every single image onto a block of wood. Then you ink it up and press it onto paper. It was slow, sure, but it was a start. It proved an idea could be duplicated. For centuries, this idea traveled slowly, moving along trade routes and with missionaries. It went from China to Japan, where we find the oldest printed book we know of, the Diamond Sutra, from way back in 868. And get this, the paper itself took until the 11th century to even get to Europe. The technology followed even later with explorers like Marco Polo. So we're talking about a very slow burn. By the time woodblock printing finally got a foothold in Europe, the continent was, well, it was ready for something more. The demand for books and knowledge was just exploding, and the old way of doing things just wasn't going to cut it. See, before print, all you had were handwritten manuscripts. And yeah, they were beautiful works of art, but they were unbelievably expensive and took forever to make. A scribe could spend years on a single copy. Europe desperately needed a way to make books that were cheaper, faster, and easier for a growing number of readers to get their hands on. So, the guy who finally cracks this puzzle? He's not a scholar or a monk. He's Johann Gutenberg, a goldsmith from Germany who was an expert in working with metal. And he saw a way to connect a few different technologies in a totally new way. And this is the brilliant part. It wasn't one single invention. It was a mashup. He took the kind of screw press that people used for making wine and olive oil. Then he used his goldsmithing skills to create these perfect, reusable metal letters. And he put it all together. It was this genius fusion of different fields that changed everything. And what was the first big test for his new machine? The Bible. A massive undertaking. In the time it would have taken a single, highly skilled scribe to copy that book just once, Gutenberg's press churned out this many copies. 180. Think about that for a second. One scribe makes one book. One machine makes 180. This wasn't just a small step forward. This was a quantum leap. The print revolution was officially on. So this incredible new speed had an immediate, and I mean immediate, effect on society. It didn't just change how many books there were, it changed who could read them, and even how we experience information. The most important thing is this: the cost of books just plummeted. Knowledge that had been locked away, the exclusive property of the church and the super rich, was suddenly becoming affordable for a much wider audience. And that created this massive cultural shift. Before, most people were part of a hearing public. Information was shared out loud in groups. But now people could become a reading public. You could buy a book, take it home, and read it by yourself, in silence. This really helped foster things like individualism and private opinion. Okay, so what happens when you give a ton of people access to new ideas all at once? Well, the people in power tend to get a little nervous. And almost immediately, print became this powerful engine for huge political and religious change. You've got the religious reformer, Martin Luther, who saw the printing press as a tool from God. He used it to print his criticisms of the Catholic Church, and his ideas just spread like wildfire. We're talking 5,000 copies of his writings sold in just a few weeks. Unheard of at the time. It basically kicked off the Protestant Reformation. But of course, the church was terrified. I mean, if anyone could just pick up a Bible and decide for themselves what it meant, that could lead to all sorts of rebellious, heretical ideas. They were afraid of losing their total control over the interpretation of Scripture. And this wasn't just some abstract fear. It was real. There's this story of an Italian miller named Minocchio. He read some books, and he started to reinterpret the Bible in his own way. The church called his ideas heresy and had him executed. To stop more people like him, they created an index of prohibited books in 1558. It was a blacklist, a direct attempt to control what people were allowed to read. And this power to challenge authority didn't stop there. Fast forward to the French Revolution. Print basically laid the groundwork. First, it spread the radical ideas of thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau, who were all about reason and questioning authority. Second, it created a new culture of debate, where ordinary people started to discuss and question everything. And finally, by the 1780s, you had cartoons and pamphlets everywhere openly mocking the king and queen, which totally destroyed their aura of power. But the story of print isn't just a European one. As this technology spread across the world, it took on a whole new life in different cultures. So now, let's take the journey to India and see what happened there. So the first press actually landed in Goa with Portuguese missionaries way back in the mid-1500s. But it took centuries for its real power to be unlocked by Indians themselves. In 1780, we see the first newspaper. By the 1820s, Indian reformers are using print to spark intense debates about religion and tradition, and by 1871, writers like Jyotiba Phule are using it to launch powerful critiques of the caste system. And what's so amazing here is how print empowered so many different people who had been sidelined. For women like Rashandari Debi, who actually taught herself to read in secret, it was a way to write the very first full-length autobiography by an Indian woman. For poor people, cheap, small books and new lending libraries opened up a whole new world. And for workers, it became a tool to expose injustice. Print really did give a voice to people who had been silenced for centuries. So from woodblocks in ancient China to the revolutionary presses in Europe and the reformist newspapers in India, the journey of print literally changed what it means to be human. It democratized knowledge, it challenged power, and it gave a voice to the voiceless. And looking at our world today, it leaves us with one last big question. What technology is doing that for us right now? And what revolution is it just beginning?